Innocence and Ink. Previous episodes are available on playlist, a link is given in the video description. Episode 3. Kade's eyes softened and shone with love. No one had ever cared for him this much before, not even his parents. He smiled down at her and said, "My little protector." Isla turned red and pressed her lips together to keep from smiling. She was trying to be serious, but Kade was clearly not taking her seriously. He opened the door for Isla when they got to his car. She huffed and tried to get into the car, but Kade sighed and grabbed her wrist and pulled her into his chest. "Thank you for caring, baby, but you don't have to worry about me." He smiled and pressed their fronts together. "I'm a grown man." Isla held on to his biceps to keep herself steady and looked up at him with doubt. "Okay. But I still don't like it," she said with a sigh. Kade smiled, then bent down to kiss her lips, which were pouting. Isla had to stand on her tiptoes to keep up with his fast, aggressive kiss. Kade smirked and patted her bottom as he pulled away, telling her to get in the car. After the two got to Kade's house, it was already evening. Isla offered to make Kade a big brunch because she had heard him say that he hadn't eaten anything that morning. She made chicken and waffles with her own syrup 40 minutes later. It was the perfect mix of breakfast and lunch. After that, they started watching a lot of Netflix shows, from Black Mirror to SpongeBob SquarePants. Kade held Isla close to him, wrapping his arms around her to keep her safe. While she was thinking about how much she liked that he changed into a blue t-shirt before brunch, she absent-mindedly traced the tattoos on his forearms and fingers. When the doorbell rang, she laughed at another thing Kade had said about SpongeBob. Her cheeks were rosy from laughing as she looked up at him. "Is one of your friends here?" he said. "I don't have friends." Isla tapped his forearm lightly and laughed. "Yes, you do, Micah." Kade laughed and hugged her even tighter. Okay, a second ring of the doorbell broke up their laughter, and Kade frowned. "Stay here, I'll be back soon." Kade went up the stairs, leaving Isla alone in the home theater with only SpongeBob to keep her company. Kade ran up the stairs two at a time and then walked the short distance to his front door. He stood in front of the wooden barrier and quickly decided to go home to get his gun instead of going straight home. He took the gun out of his locked desk and pulled the slide back to see if it was loaded. When he saw that it was, he let it snap back into place. Kade got back to the front door just in time to hear the bell ring again. This time, he was ready to open. "Hey, boss, I'm sorry too." There was an Asian man of medium build on the other side of the door with a gun to his head. Kade lowered the gun and let the person in when he realized that they were not a threat but one of his employees. "Douglas, what are you doing here?" "I don't like it when people show up without an invitation," Kade whispered harshly. He turned around to check that Isla hadn't snuck upstairs. "Sorry, boss, but you weren't answering your phone. I wanted to let you know that the Graviborns are clean, as far as I can tell. Either they're no longer in touch with Rhodes or they're doing a great job of hiding it." When Kade looked behind him for the third time, he frowned. He leaned in the direction of Kade's line of sight, trying to get him to look at him. "I think you should let them go either way. We don't want to take the chance that they might work with Rhodes, even though I'm almost sure they won't." Kade hummed and looked back at Brian Douglas, who was clearly not paying attention to what he was saying. "Yeah, whatever you say. Tell me again in the office." Kade's quiet whispers were cut short when he heard small feet coming his way. He swore under his breath. He didn't want Isla to ask him any questions about Douglas or why he was there. He just wanted her to meet a small group of his men in a safe place, and this was not that. "Kade? Who are you talking to?" Isla's small body came around the corner, and she stopped in her tracks when she saw the stranger in his house. Kade gave Douglas a hard look, then softened his eyes when he looked at Isla. "Baby, I thought I told you to stay put," he said. Isla turned red and rocked back and forth on her feet. "You were taking a long time," she said quietly. Kade clenched his jaw but turned to face Douglas when he spoke. "I think I should go," he said awkwardly, pointing to the door with his finger. Kade rolled his eyes but said yes. "Yes. Get out." He sighed in anger and began to climb the stairs to his room. "Please listen to me next time, baby." He could have been a dangerous person. Isla walked up behind him and twisted her fingers in guilt. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother you." Kade closed the door to his bedroom and sat on his bed. He grabbed the scared girl by the arm and pulled her down into his lap. "I'm sorry I didn't listen to you," Isla said again. She knew how dangerous his job was, and if he was this upset, she knew he was serious. Instead of answering, Kade flipped them over so that he was above her and she was lying on the bed with her legs still wrapped around his waist. He leaned in so that their lips were almost touching, then smiled. "Daddy forgives you, baby." Isla giggled as Kade kissed her, and a bunch of butterflies tickled her stomach when she said the name she had said in a joking way a while ago. It made her toes curl and sent a tingling sensation down below. His tongue ran across her bottom lip, and she opened her mouth willingly, making it easy for him to taste all of her. The playful affection turned into something more passionate. His ring-covered fingers, "You're perfect." Isla felt shy when he looked at her and squeezed her eyes shut. It was more uncomfortable than painful, and Kade's advice to relax her muscles definitely helped. Still, Kade was nice enough to let her get used to how big he was. While he waited, he kissed her all over her face. Isla urged, "You can go now." Her body was much more relaxed than it had been. "Oh my God," she moaned as she came down from her high. When Kade let go, Isla fell down. She was totally exhausted. Kade held her small body against his broad chest while he calmed down. He whispered, "My beautiful girl," and then he lay on his back so that her body rested on top of him. They lay still until their heart rates went back to normal and their eyes fluttered as they were about to fall asleep. Isla's soft voice broke the silence. "I think I'm in love with you, Kade." Kade's eyes got big with surprise, and he bit his lip to keep from smiling. After a while, you could hear his rough voice. "Baby, I've loved you since the first day we met." Isla woke up to the sound of running water and heavy footsteps. She made a small noise of disapproval at the noise before rolling over to find the big body that kept her warm at night. She groaned in confusion when she felt nothing but sheets and tried to sit up, but the pain between her legs made it hard to do so. "What's all the fuss about?" Kade walked into the room with nothing on. He walked up to Isla, who had stopped moving and was staring at him. "Cat got your tongue," he teased in a playful way. Isla turned her head into the pillow and blushed. She realized she had been watching Kade like a creep. Kade laughed a little, then bent down to pick her up and talk to her again. "Stare all you want, baby. I'm all yours," he whispered softly and kissed her red cheeks. Isla looked up at him in awe as he walked towards the bathroom. "He loves me," she thought. When they got to the shower, she stood still while he put her down and played with her fingers, even though she was watching him. She saw him run his big hands through his hair and tighten his jaw while his tongue played with his piercing. His strong muscles rippled as he walked. They were strong enough to hold her, love her, and keep her safe. She shook her head and bit her lip. What a guy! She looked up at Kade with her blue doe eyes after he touched her. He smiled at her and gently pushed her into the shower. He turned on the water and set it to the right temperature after closing the shower door. "Come here," he said softly. Isla got up from where she was leaning against the wall and walked over to stand in front of him. Her head barely reached his shoulder. She saw Kade squirt some of his body wash on a new loofah and was happy as he ran the soft sponge over her body. She put her head on his chest while he cleaned her with soft hands. She looked up and saw him getting ready to wash himself when she didn't feel his hands on her anymore. "Yes?" he asked with a smile. "Let me do you," she said with a grin. Kade laughed and lowered his arm to give her the loofah. Isla picked it up with her small hands and added some body wash before starting her work. If Kade could have, he would have rumbled with pleasure at the soft, gentle movements. He shut his eyes and held her inviting hips, just enjoying the feeling. He said, "You're the only person I've ever loved." He opened one eye to see how she would react, but her face didn't change, so he kept going. "I've never had a girlfriend before you," he said, running his hands down her arms and sighing. "You're my first." Isla stopped moving and slowly opened her mouth. She wanted to ask him something, but she didn't want to make him mad. "Then what about your parents?" she asked in a low voice. Kade pulled his hands away from her hips and turned his head to the side, his jaw tight. Isla bit her lip and opened her eyes wide in fear. She moved a little closer to him and put her hand on his bicep. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you mad," she said, looking down and lowering her voice. "I just thought that." Kade picked her up and pushed her into a corner of the shower, where his body towered over hers. He bent down and looked her in the eye before he spoke. "My parents were very bad people, baby. They hurt me and everyone else around them. I never want to hear you say anything about them again." Isla shrank against the wall that was holding her up and nodded her head in agreement with what he said. Kade raised an eyebrow at her expectantly, and Isla stammered out an answer in fear. "Okay, I won't." Kade put his hands on the wall above her and kissed her neck, then left a kiss below her ear. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. My parents are just a touchy subject for me." Isla hummed in agreement and ran her fingers through his hair to try to make him feel better. Kade sighed and picked her up. She wrapped her legs around his waist, and he held her up with his hands on her bum. "I don't deserve you," he said in a breathy voice. Isla put her small hands on his cheeks and frowned, not sure what he meant. "Yes, you do." He kissed her full lips with love and a small smile on the corner of his mouth. He kept kissing her as he walked closer to the wall, pushing her back against it. Isla stopped kissing him and put her lips on his neck, sucking and bruising the skin. "No one has ever loved me like you do," she said, her voice shaking. Kade kissed a tear that fell from her eyes and rested his forehead against hers. "It's their loss," he said softly over her mouth. She turned her head to the side and rested her cheek against the wet wall behind her. As he got closer to the end, his speed slowed back down to long, deep strokes. Isla pressed her heels into his back and tightened around his shaft as she joined him in finding release. "I'm the only one who can make you feel this way," he said, holding her. "Can you feel me?" He let go of her hands and stepped back from the wall. Isla nodded and put her arms around his neck. "Yes, I can feel all of you." Kade cursed under his breath as he reached his peak and thrust one last time, releasing his seed deep inside her. He panted as he came down from his high and nipped Isla's neck softly, making her squeal. He let out a breathy laugh before picking her up off of his now dead rod. He said as he ran his hands through his hair in a panic. He looked down at her again. Her eyes were wide with confusion as she looked up at him. He yelled. Isla asked in a worried voice, "What's wrong?" Kade looked down at her in disbelief and swore again. He told her straight out, "Baby, you could get pregnant." Isla's eyebrows went up in surprise. She had completely forgotten about protection. She put her hand over her mouth and tried not to give in to her anxiety, but her heart raced in her chest. "How could we forget? Kade, I can't have a baby," she yelled in a panic. I know. "I'm sorry baby, I wasn't thinking." Kade ran his hands through his wet hair and tried not to hit the wall with his fist. "There has to be something we can do. A shot, a pill, or something," Isla said, holding her head in her hands as she tried to make sense of their situation and find a way out. Kade's eyes lit up when she spoke. "Yes, the pill. You can take a pill." He turned off the shower head and jumped out, wrapping Isla in a towel as he did so. "Here, put this on," he said. Isla did what he asked and put on one of his hoodies and a pair of sweats before jogging down the stairs to leave in his car. As Kade drove down the street in town, he looked at Isla every few seconds. "Are you okay? How do you feel?" he asked in a worried tone. Isla shrugged and played with the ends of her sweater. "I feel the same." She bent her knees and turned her head to look at him. "Do you think it will hurt?" "The pill?" she asked. Kade's stomach hurt and he wanted to punch himself right then and there. He was older and more experienced, but he had messed up and put them in this situation. "I don't know," he said honestly. He looked at her for a second before looking back at the road. The time flew by, and before they knew it, they were at the local drugstore. Kade looked over at Isla in question as he parked the car. The silence around them was deafening. "Do you want to stay in here while I get it?" Isla shook her head so hard that her hair hit her in the face. Kade laughed softly and got a hair tie from his car that she had left there a while ago. He put her hair up in a messy bun and then gently stroked her cheeks with his hands. He smiled a little before getting out of the car and opening the door for her not long after. When they got to the store, a bell rang, and Kade took her small hand and led her inside. He read the signs above the aisles and walked towards the one that said Pregnancy and Feminine Hygiene. Isla followed closely behind him. He squinted at the small package and said, "I think this is it." Isla nodded without saying anything and held on to the back of his sweater as they walked to the cash register. The employee was an older man who looked at both of them while he rang up the item. "Have you ever heard of pulling out?" He laughed and raised an eyebrow. Kade gritted his teeth and grabbed the man's wrist, pulling him over the counter. "Clearly you don't know who I am, because if you did, you wouldn't say such," he said angrily into his ear. Kade let go of his wrist and took the box that was in his hand. Isla's touch made his breathing slow down. "Let's go, baby," he said, but he kept his eyes on the older man, whose eyes were wide and hands were shaking. As Kade led them through the parking lot to his car, Isla's 2 fingers were hooked onto his belt loop. Kade was still angry about what the cashier said, and his jaw was clicking in annoyance. "Kade, you're walking too fast," Isla said as she tried to keep up with him. His long legs moved quickly across the road, pulling the shorter girl along behind him. Her voice brought him back to reality, and he stopped walking and listened to her. Kade looked down at her and felt guilty right away. He should have known better. It was wrong of him to get caught up in his desire, and now Isla had to take a pill for something that was really his fault. And as much as he didn't want to, the jerk in the store was almost right. Kade's thoughts were full of guilt, but he didn't show it on his face. Isla could tell he was upset by the way his jaw was clenched and the other small things that would go unnoticed by someone who didn't know him. But she did. "What's the matter?" Isla asked softly, her voice full of worry. Kade turned his eyes away from her and ignored the question. Instead, he led them to his car. "Let's get this over with," he said quietly, telling her to sit down. Isla frowned and furrowed her brows. It was clear that something was bothering him, and she wasn't blind to it. It had to do with their mistake, and she hoped he didn't blame himself. Accidents happen. When Kade got in the car and drove them back to his house, Isla didn't say anything. She didn't want to bother him if he was in a bad mood. She remembered something important when he pulled into the driveway and spoke. Isla said quietly, "I have work today." She forgot all about it because of the morning they had, and she bit her bottom lip in anticipation of Kade's answer. He simply said, "You're not going," before getting out of the car and opening her door on the other side. Isla bit her lip as she got up, but she was glad he said what she was thinking. She really didn't want to go to work and put on a smile even though she was going through a lot. Plus, she's never missed work since she started, so taking one day off should be fine. Kade took them to the kitchen and put the box on the counter. Then he motioned for Isla to come over to him. She walked the rest of the way over in his loose-fitting sweatpants, which made the corner of Kade's mouth twitch. He grabbed her hips and lifted her up to sit on the counter. The blonde gasped in surprise. Kade picked up the box again and frowned as he read the instructions, even the small print. "Okay, it says you should take 1 pill now and another one in 12 hours. Isla nodded slowly and then nervously clenched his sweater. "Are there any side effects?" Kade set the box down, nodded, and then walked to the sink to fill a glass with water. "You might feel sick and have a little stomach pain." He turned around and walked towards her until he was standing between her legs. "Do you want me to break it in half, or can you take it?" he offered. No, I can take the whole thing, she said softly. He put the white pill in her hand and gave her the water, then watched her swallow it all. Good girl. He said nice things before swiping at a drop of water that had gotten past her lips. He put his hands on either side of her and leaned against the counter. Do you want to go somewhere to get your mind off of things? Isla shrugged and played with her fingers. She wouldn't mind getting some things for Hallowed next weekend. Do you think they'll be angry that I'm not at work? She asked out of the blue. Kade frowned and tilted her head up so she could see him. Of course not. You go there every day. But you are the reason they have been so busy. You might want to open your own bakery. I could make that happen, he said softly, brushing a strand of hair away from her eyes. Isla turned red and leaned into his hand. I couldn't ask you to do that for me, she said softly. Plus, I wouldn't even know what to do. And I can't just leave Bryn there, they would have to find someone else to take my place. Kade smiled a little and was still amazed by how humble she was. If he were her, he would have it and left. You're too nice, baby, he said as he rubbed his face against her neck. Isla laughed and lightly hit his back. How about we go to the store to buy pumpkins? She said. Kade kissed her neck and picked her up off the counter, which made her scream. Time to go pumpkin shopping. Isla said, this one's really big, as she walked over to a pumpkin that was bigger than the rest. She turned to ask him what he thought, and her denim skirt swayed as she moved. Sure baby, he said with a boyish laugh. Isla rolled her eyes at how immature he was as he lifted the vegetable in his arms. Isla showed them the way to the checkout area, which was under a makeshift tent. Kade found a really cute farm with a famous pumpkin patch, and it was nice to be outside with all the greenery. While Kade was talking to the cashier, she got a little lost in the sights and sounds of the people around her. She was watching an old couple pick their own pumpkins when someone tapped her on the shoulder. Are you lost? Isla turned around and saw a tall man looking down at her with worry. He looked to be about Kade's age, maybe a little older. He had short brown hair and big muscles. He was very scary, to say the least. Isla didn't think she should be scared of the man, even though he looked scary. He didn't seem like he was going to hurt her. Oh no, sir, I'm with someone, she said with a polite smile. Her eyes darted around the crowd, looking for the man she was with. Do you need help looking for them? Sorry, I couldn't help but see. What do you think you're doing? Kade pulled Isla away from the stranger and put her behind his back. Kade, do you know this girl? The man asked in shock. Kade didn't answer his question and walked closer to the man until their chests were touching. Don't look at her, don't touch her, and don't even ask about her, he said, his eyes blazing with anger. Since you're here, I should tell you about your business partner, Lorenzo. Just so you know, he's dead. Rhodes frowned and furrowed his brows in confusion at what Kade said. What are you talking about? How many times do I have to tell you that I'm not out to get you? He laughed in disbelief and then said, I get why you hate me and why you're doing all of this, but I've never plotted against you. His eye softened a little. I'm your brother. Not by blood, Kade said, spitting and moving away from the older man. Get away from me and leave me alone. Stop trying to give me this crap when you're hiring scum to steal from me. He hardened his eyes as he spoke his last words. I want it more. Keep that in mind. You have a brother. Isla screamed in shock as he pulled her away from the disaster area. Kade never told her about his family. In fact, he had told her that his parents were terrible people. Not now, Isla, he said sharply. He was in the middle of taking her out of the pumpkin patch when he saw Vincent Rhodes and tried to get as far away from him as possible. Isla stopped walking, which made Kade have to carry her dead weight for a while. He turned around when he felt more resistance and saw that her lips were downturned in a frown. Isla, please. Can we just leave? Isla didn't like the way he spoke, but she nodded anyway. She understood what he was going through and tried not to let his misplaced anger get to her. They kept walking in silence as they left the pumpkin patch and got close to his car. The sun was going down outside, and the sky was a beautiful orange and pink. The bright and calm colors of the sky were very different from the dark and sad thoughts that were going through Kade's head. I'm sorry. He said he was sorry when they were in the car. Isla nodded and smiled a little. She held their hands together in a comforting way and squeezed them to show she was there for them. Kade took them to a Starbucks, where Isla got a hot chocolate and he got a black coffee. Isla suggested that they walk to the park, which was only a few minutes away, instead of staying in the car. A comfortable but tense silence surrounded them as they walked out the front door. Kade said first, I know you have questions, baby. He sighed and looked up at the bright sky. I didn't want you to know this part of my past. He looked at her for a second before saying, it's not pretty. Isla squeezed his hand and then tried to wrap her arm around his waist in a way that would make him feel better. He laughed and let out a breath, trying to pay attention to the sound of their footsteps. Not even Micah knows the whole story of my childhood. Isla nodded, telling him to keep talking. The man you met today was my brother. His parents took me in when I was a child. We're not related by blood. They turned into the park, and Kade took them to an empty bench where Isla snuggled up next to him. Vincent's dad was a drug lord, the biggest one in North America. He got married and then had a son. Vincent's mother was told she had terminal cancer when he was 8. It was a shock because she was so young. She was heartbroken, but the only thing that really upset her was that she couldn't have any more kids. Kade gritted his teeth, turned his head to the side, and let out a funny huff. Her husband was heartbroken, she was everything to him. He took in a child from an orphanage who had been left behind to try to make her feel better. And it did. He looked down at Isla and locked eyes with her. Then she passed away. Isla's heart raced in her chest. She could tell that this story was going to get worse. I was 6 years old at the time. Going back was not an option for her. She was too young to blow. The husband was a wreck. After she died, he went completely crazy, and I was there to make things worse. As he told the story, his voice got deeper. I was a living reminder of what his wife wanted, her last wish. He beat me every day and made fun of me. All Vincent did was watch. He laughed bitterly and bounced his knee as he spoke. When I was 16, I stabbed him in the neck with a fork after he told me I was a worthless piece who would never amount to anything. I knew that Vincent would get his father's title as the heir to his empire, but I wanted him to feel like he was less than how I felt when we were kids. Kade shrugged and licked his lips. I got into the same business. I started selling drugs, buying guns, and all this other stuff to make sure the road's name didn't live on in their legacy. You would think he would stop and step down. It's the least he could do since he didn't do anything. He shook his head and let out another sarcastic laugh. But he didn't. He kept selling drugs and getting money, so of course we became enemies. I don't like him, I hate him, and I don't understand why he acts like we're not enemies when I know he's hurt my feelings. After that, no one said anything, and Kade didn't want to look down at the little girl in his lap. After hearing the traumatic story, Isla didn't know what to say. Kade was adopted. He killed his dad? She couldn't think straight, and she really didn't know what to say. Did he tell you why he didn't help you when you were kids? Isla finally asked in a soft voice. Kade rolled his eyes when she asked. No, and I don't want to hear it. But don't you think he will get what you're saying if you talk to him about it? She asked again. Kade furrowed his brows and hardened his gaze in defense. He knew what she was saying was true, but he wasn't ready to admit it. Baby, I know you're trying to help, but the last thing I want to do is be near him. Isla bit her lip and nodded before pressing again. I just think that you would be happier if you didn't hate anyone. I don't want you to be angry all the time, she said carefully. Kade sighed and played with the ends of her hair. I know, baby, but it's more than that. He has been working with other people to try to kill me. You can't forgive that. Isla pulled on her sleeves and opened her mouth slowly. How do you know? Kade frowned and said, I just do. Isla frowned at his answer but didn't say anything else. Instead, she reached up and touched his cheek, stroking it gently. He looked down at her and his eyes softened when she reached out to him. Thank you for telling me, she said after a moment. Kade nodded without thinking about it and looked away from her blue eyes. They didn't talk, but their minds were full of thoughts. The next day went on as usual, as if nothing had happened. Isla went to work, and Kade did too. To everyone's surprise, the energy between them stayed the same. Isla got a call at the end of her shift. She only ever got one call, so she answered without looking at the caller ID. Hey Kade, I'll be out in a second, she said quickly as she put on her coat. Isla? It's Clarice, sweetie, a woman's voice said. Isla stopped moving, and her heart felt like it was going to fall out of her chest. After a moment, she said, Hi. Isla hadn't seen Clarice since they fought and she ran away from the orphanage. She didn't like how she talked about Kade, and now that she knows how she feels about him, she doesn't feel safe around her. I'm sorry for how things ended between us the last time we saw each other, Isla. I didn't mean to make you so upset, I just don't want you to get hurt, Clarice said softly. Isla nervously bit her lip. She didn't know what to say. Finally, Isla whispered, I love him. And I don't like it when you talk about him like that. She could hear Clarice sigh on the other end, but she was surprised by what she said next. How about you invite him over for dinner? Let's get to know each other better, Clarice said in a kind way. Isla almost gasped at the offer, and she nodded her head before realizing that no one else saw it. Why yeah, that would be nice, she said softly. Come over at 6. Clarice said, I'll make you a nice spaghetti dinner, your favorite. Isla could hear the smile in her voice. I'll try to see the good in him, Isla. I'll try for you, Clarice said. Isla smiled at what she said because she liked the effort. Thanks, she said as she left the bakery. I'm sorry, Clarice said. It's the least I can do. Isla hummed when she saw dark hair and tattoos, and then she said a quiet goodbye before hanging up. Who were you talking to? Why did you walk to my car? He asked. Clarice, she said, her face pressed against his chest. Kade pushed her back a little so he could see her face. Why? He asked with a look of confusion. The last time she was with Clarice, she ran away in her pajamas and then called him. Isla shrugged and rocked back and forth on her feet. She wants to eat. She looked down before quickly looking up to meet his gaze. With both of us. Kade tried not to look too against the idea, but he really didn't like the woman, especially after how she treated Isla the last time. Are you sure? He said carefully, things didn't go so well the last time you talked. Isla frowned, but she got what he was saying. I know, but I want to believe that she's trying, she whispered. Kade sighed and nodded, then pointed to the car and told her to get in. Okay, we'll have dinner then. Isla smiled and stood on her tiptoes to kiss him right under the chin. Thank you, she said with a smile before getting into his car. Kade laughed. Of course, baby. Isla still hadn't picked out an outfit by 5:30. She didn't know why she was making it such a big deal. Dinner there was normal for her because she had lived there her whole life. Dinner with Kade and Clarice, on the other hand, was not. She let out a tired huff and then fell onto the bed. She looked up at the ceiling and tried to picture herself in different outfits so she wouldn't have to try them all on. She suddenly sat up after a minute. Finally, she said with a smile. She had just thought of the link to the best thing to wear. Isla was one of those girls who didn't care how cold it got outside. She would wear her skirts and dresses no matter what the weather was like. The bathroom door opened just as she was tying the front of her dress. She looked up and saw Kade in a white button-down shirt and what looked like a new pair of jeans. Baby, that dress is way too short, he said as he pushed her against the counter. Isla turned red and looked down at her feet. I thought it looked nice, she said in a low voice. Kade ran his hand up the side of her thigh and groaned when he felt her panty line under the dress. He turned her around so that his groin was against her back. This dress is more than nice, he said as he kissed her neck. He bit her skin and sucked on it, leaving a mark. Isla let him do what he wanted until she saw what would happen because of it. Wait, no, she said. She pushed him away and out of the cornered position. Kade frowned but took a step back. What's wrong? Why? He asked. We're having dinner soon. I don't want Clarice to ask me about the bruises on my neck, she said clearly. Kade smiled a little and laughed. Later anonymous. Isla didn't pay attention to what he said and turned around to keep getting ready. She did, however, scream when he slapped her on the back. Before leaving the bathroom, Kade laughed and waited for Isla to finish getting ready so they could leave. Isla took a deep breath after he left and looked in the mirror. When she saw a big purple bruise on her face, she gasped in shock. She groaned softly and ran her fingers through her hair to try to hide the bruise. She never wore makeup, mostly because she couldn't afford it. She knew she could probably buy some now that she had saved up some money from her job, but since she had never worn it before, she didn't see the point. It seemed like a necessary buy now. She looked at the clock and saw that it was almost 5:50, so she didn't want to be late. Isla opened the door and walked down the stairs, then put on a pair of white Converse shoes. Kade was already by the door, texting on his phone. When he heard her little feet coming towards him, he looked up and smiled. "Are you ready?" "Why?" he asked. Isla smiled, bounced on her heels, and then nodded. "Okay, let's go," he said as he opened the door. The ride to the orphanage was short. They were soon standing in front of the door. "Should I knock?" Isla asked nervously. I kind of live here, so I'm not sure if," she went on and on. He rubbed the sides of her arms to make her feel better. "Relax," he said softly before kissing her on the top of the head. She nodded, let out a breath, and then lightly knocked on the door. There was no answer for a minute, and just as she was about to knock again, the door flew open. "Isla, honey, how are you?" "Hello," Clarice said warmly. She gave the short blonde a tight hug before looking up at the scary-looking man next to her. "Kade." She nodded and smiled, but it was more of a grimace than a smile. Kade smiled at the woman, but it was forced. Her eyes flickered with doubt before she moved to the side to let the two of them in. "You know where the dining room is, Isla. Just sit down in there and I'll bring you the food," Clarice said. Isla said okay in a soft voice and took Kade's hand to show him the way. Kade raised the back of her hand to his lips and kissed it for a long time while keeping his eyes on the older woman who was watching from a distance. Clarice felt sick when she saw this bad kid getting too close to this girl. She quickly left the scene and went to get food from the kitchen. "Okay, here we are," she said as she set the dishes on the table. Isla smiled and gently touched the woman's wrist. "Clarice, this looks great." The older woman sat across from the couple, who were sitting next to each other. Clarice was glad that the volunteers could take the kids on a short outing, so she made sure they were out of the house. "So, how's work been, dear?" she asked after putting her food on a plate. Isla ate a forkful of spaghetti before she answered. "It's been good. Pretty busy, but my friend Bryn is with me." She said this while twirling more pasta on her fork. Clarice hummed and drank her water. "I'm glad you like it there, sweetheart. So, Kade, what do you do for a job?" she asked after a minute. Isla got tense when she heard the question, almost forgetting what her boyfriend did for a living. She stuffed her mouth with more food so she wouldn't make any noise she couldn't control. "I run a business," he said before taking a sip of water. "Merchandise," he said after swallowing. Clarice nodded slowly and twirled more spaghetti on her fork. "And what about your family? Do you have any brothers or sisters?" she asked while bringing the food to her mouth. Kade's face got hard and his jaw ticked. He tightened his grip on the fork, making his hand turn white. "No," he said quickly. Isla nervously looked back and forth between the two, afraid that Clarice would say something that would make him angry. She put her small hand on his knee, hoping it would be enough to calm him down. He didn't scare her with words, but his intense glare made her squirm, and his most cynical parts loved every second of it. There was no more talking during the rest of dinner. The three of them sat in a comfortable but strained silence. When they were done, Clarice got up and picked up some of the plates and dishes. This made Isla get up and help. She kissed Kade on the forehead and said softly that she would be back. The two women washed the dishes in the kitchen without saying a word. Clarice sighed and looked at Isla, who was drying a cup on the third plate. Isla. She started with soft eyes. I'm trying to figure out why you're with him, but I just don't get it. You are very young, dear. You just graduated from high school. You're just a girl, Isla, and he's a man, she said with worry. Isla frowned and put the cup in the cupboard. She didn't get why Clarice was so worried about her relationship with Kade. He looked scary, but he was nice to her. What was the problem? Do you know what guys want? Clarice asked before she turned back to her plate to clean it. They had ex, Isla. Because of that, I don't want him to be near you. Isla's mouth opened and her cheeks turned bright red. Clarice saw her reaction when she tried to give her the plate and scrunched up her face in confusion. Then her eyes widened in shock. Her eyes then moved to the side of her neck, where a big bruise was clearly visible in the kitchen light. Have you two been close? She said in a shocked voice. Isla wrapped her arms around herself and nodded slowly, turning even redder. Clarice gasped and let the plate fall into the sink. But what if we wait until we're married? The woman yelled. We talked about this. No, you talked about it. I just listened, Isla said in a harsh whisper. I've been safe and sheltered my whole life. I've never done anything risky, or even lived. Clarice, I'm an adult now, but I still care about you. You raised me, but I'm an adult now, and I'm using the judgment you gave me. I love him, and he loves me. I thought you asked us over because you were starting to get it. I'm trying, Clarice said in frustration. Really, I am. She said it again, this time in a softer voice. But I don't. I don't even know who you are anymore. Isla's eyes filled with tears when she said that. I'm the same Isla, she said in a shaky voice. No, no you're not, Clarice said, shaking her head. My Isla wouldn't go off with the town's troublemaker and let him get into her pants so easily. Isla flinched at what she said and cried out in pain. A few moments later, Kade was at the door with a worried look on his face. What is going on? Why? He asked when he saw Isla's hurt face and tears in her eyes. Isla walked up to him and cried on his chest. I just told Isla it was time for her to leave, Clarice said in a mean way. Kade's brows furrowed and his jaw clenched in anger. Excuse me. Go ahead and say it again, he said. I should have called the cops the first time I saw you, she said. Now you've ruined a sweet girl and you're going to throw her away like trash when you're done with her. Kade pressed his tongue against his cheek and let out a dark laugh. Listen here, he said. You don't need to worry about Isla. She was nice enough to come over here, even after all the shit you put her through. He laughed dryly and then said, I'm not so nice." He moved closer to the woman who was shaking, with Isla still holding on to him. "You won't see her again." He was furious and said, "It won't be pretty if you try to get in touch with her." Clarice flinched at what looked like a threat, and her throat closed up as she tried not to cry. She knew she would never see Isla again when she heard the front door slam shut behind them. She hated Kade for it, even though it was her fault. Isla's mouth was open in shock at what had just happened. As she walked behind Kade, silent tears streamed down her cheeks. She was overwhelmed by the fact that she was leaving the only home she had ever known, the only mother and caretaker she had ever had. She couldn't stop thinking about the scene, and she cried hard as she remembered how disgusted Clarice looked at her. "What can I do to improve this? How do I fix this?" Her mind was racing, and she was desperate to find ways to fix her relationship with the only person who had ever cared about her. Yes, her words hurt, but she didn't want to fight and say a few rude things that would keep them apart forever. She flinched at the soothing touch because it was so unexpected. Her eyes were red, and her lip trembled as she remembered what he had said to Clarice. "Why would you say that?" she yelled. He had basically threatened the woman and told her that if she ever talked to Isla again, something bad would happen to her. Kade frowned and his jaw ticked. He was a little annoyed that people were questioning what he had done, especially since he wasn't the one who had been slandering her. "Baby, she was disrespecting you. I won't put up with that from anyone." He was right. Isla's bottom lip shook, and more tears fell on her chubby cheeks. Isla whispered, "She hates me." When they put her in the car, she didn't say anything. Her body was numb to everything around her. Kade went to kiss the top of her head, but she flinched and whined. "You made it worse." Kade looked at her for a minute, then slammed the door and hit the roof of the car with his fist. He yelled in anger. Isla jumped in her seat when he yelled. A heavy weight settled on her chest as she felt guilty for his sudden anger. She was sorry. She nervously bit her bottom lip as he opened the door. "I'm sorry, Kade, I didn't mean that," she said in a low voice. She looked down and played with her fingers while she thought of things to say to explain herself. "Clarice was the only person who really liked me. She took care of me and raised me, but now she thinks I'm a whore." Her voice broke and shook as she spoke. Kade's eyes softened when he saw how sad she looked. He sighed. "Isla," he said. She sniffled and looked up at him. He had to fight the urge to smile at how cute her nose kept getting bunched up. "I'm not going to say sorry for putting her in her place. No parent should ever say what she said to you. You're not a whore." He held her small hands in his big ones and looked her in the eyes. "I know you have a relationship with her, but it's not good for you to be treated that way. She doesn't like me, and things aren't going to be the same between you two as long as I'm around." Isla sucked in her cheeks and nodded, but she didn't want to let go of his hands. "I get it," she said softly. Kade looked at her closely before deciding to leave her alone. He drove back to his house after getting off the curb, thinking of ways to cheer her up. "Isla, baby, please talk to me," Kade begged in a soft voice. They got home an hour ago, and she went straight to bed. No matter what he said, she hadn't moved from her spot. Kade was worried because her eyes looked far away. He walked back and forth in his room until he had an idea. "How about I read you a book?" "What do you think?" he said softly. Isla's eyes went to his and she sniffled. Kade smiled and took that as a sign to grab a random book from his shelf. He knew she would like it because they both liked the same kinds of books. He picked Isla up from the bed with the book under his arm, and she squealed in surprise. He laughed at how she reacted and sat her on his lap as he lowered himself into the big chair in the corner of his room. It was in the perfect spot under his big window that went all the way to the floor, which gave it great light. "Do you know this one?" he asked quietly, almost mumbling. Isla turned her head a little and nodded while snuggling into his warm chest. He started to read to her, and his voice sounded like a series of hypnotic rumbles coming from his chest. Isla couldn't decide if she liked the sound of his voice or the calming vibrations he made better. It was hard for her to keep up with the book because she had been crying so much before that she was tired and having trouble keeping her eyes open. But in the end, she gave in to the darkness and fell into a peaceful sleep. Kade stopped reading when he felt her relax on his lap. He put the book down and put it on the floor. Then he picked her up and gently tucked her in. She sighed with happiness and turned to find a cozy spot under the silk sheets. Before going to his closet to put on a suit, Kade kissed her forehead. He had some work to do. Kade asked in a low voice, "Did it work?" "Yes, sir, everything is going as planned." Marco had asked Kade to come to his penthouse. The things they were talking about were very private. He nodded, happy with what Marco had done. "Great." Kade walked into the kitchen and took out a bottle of scotch. He held it up to Marco and silently asked if he wanted a drink. "Sure," he said, nodding. Before Kade turned around, he started pouring the drink into 2 glasses. He asked, "When was it taken?" as he walked over. "At 11 p.m. yesterday, the shipment was compromised. It was taken from one of the safe houses while the security team was changing shifts." Kade smiled as he gave him a glass and clinked it a little. "Marco, if your plan works out, you'll get a promotion. I'm impressed with the work you've done so far," he said. Marco stood up straight after he said that. It was rare for the boss to say nice things. He was proud to be in that position. "Thank you, sir." Kade took a sip of the drink and liked the burn that stuck to his throat. Putting a tracker on the shipment and using it to find the little bastard is a great idea. I wish I had thought of it myself. He laughed a little and then brought the glass to his lips again. Marco laughed for a moment, then stopped when Kade's eyes met his. Kade said, "You can laugh, Marco." He checked his notifications when his phone buzzed and saw that Isla had called him 3 times. He said, and then he put his glass down on the breakfast bar. Marco asked, "Is everything okay, sir?" Kade raised his hand before calling her back and listening to the phone ring on the other end. He asked, "Baby, what's wrong? Is everything okay?" when he heard movement on the other end. She asked softly, "Where did you go?" Kade sighed and ran a hand down his face. "I had to go to work to take care of some things. I thought I would be back before you woke up," he said. Before she answered, he heard some more shuffling. "When are you coming home?" she asked in a soft voice. The only thing Kade heard, though, was the word home. He felt his heart racing in his chest as she spoke, and he answered after a moment. "Baby, soon," he said as he ran a hand through his hair. "Okay," she said. There was a minute of silence before she spoke again. "I love you." Kade smiled at what she said. "And I love you, pretty girl," he said in a low voice. When Marco caught him looking, he looked at him and his eyes went right to the wall. Kade said, "I have to go now." "Goodbye," he heard. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.